just so we'll know, can you just let everybody know what's your name and the name of your church and your congregation?
My name is Pastor Gregory Standley, and my church name of my church is Victory Tabernacle Church of God in Christ.
And also, you could just go ahead and just tell us your story that you would like to share with us.
Well, basically, I've been preaching now for 17 years, and I started preaching when I was 22 years old. I was actually called to preach when I was 14. I had a dream one night. I was sleeping and I had a dream one night, and I saw a man in the pulpit preaching with his back turned from the audience. And it's like, this is strange. Why is he preaching and he ain't looking at the audience? So I wanted to see who it was. And so I went in the pulpit and went around to where he was facing, and I saw the face, and it was me preaching. And it scared me. And so the next day I was over at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother asked me, "Did you answer the call?" I said, "What are you talking about?"
Really?
She said, "God called you to preach." And I broke down crying, and I told her, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I just need one thing from you. I need to hear you preach before I die." And that didn't happen. My grandmother died right before I was going to get my trial sermon when I was 15 years old. And I refused to do it after that. I ran.
Right.
When I turned 15, my whole world changed. I started drinking and hanging with the wrong crowds. When I turned 16, I got my first car the day I turned 16, and the second day I was in jail. But so from that point, I ran from my calling. I wound up in and out of jails. I've probably been in every jail in Jefferson County. In fact, one time I went in Vestavia, no, it was Hoover. I was in Hoover City Jail. I got out, and when I got out, Vestavia Hill was waiting on me outside.
Right. I understand that they do that.
Yeah. So I went there. And I was in and out of jail a lot. I wound up homeless. I was living on the streets. And actually I lived in the park, in Lynn Park. I stayed in Lynn Park a lot. And I worked for the city of Birmingham, and now I work at City Hall. So City Hall overlooks Lynn Park. And so now my office has a window and it overlooks Lynn Park. And so every time I get frustrated, I turn to the window.
Right.
And I look out where God brought me from. Because 20 years ago I was sleeping in that park, never knowing that I would be across the street.
Yes.
Working in City Hall. And so I was in and out of jail. I was just everywhere. And really what turned my life around was, in our denomination we have bishops. And we have a great bishop, our leader. In fact, it's him right there, Bishop O'Neill Meadows. And he came and visited me in jail one time, and he asked me the question. He said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here because this happened, this happened." He said, "No, I'm not. I I already know what the charges are. He
Right.
said, but why are you here? Because you are somebody that God have anointed, and you don't supposed to be here.
Right.
And that changed my life. That started me to thinking about me changing. And I got out of jail from that point. I went to a party.
And
I went to a party that night
mm-hmm.
with and with one of my friends, and that's where I met my wife. And I began to talk with her. She didn't know I was homeless, and I would go over her house. And then at the time, I had a car at the time. I didn't have nowhere to live. I slept in the back of the car. And I would leave her house, get in the car, and sleep in the alley. And one night I overslept, and her mom was going to work and saw me in the car. And was, why are you in this car? And I was like, I just overslept, just trying to sleep off this alcohol or something, you know. And she said, nah, she said something else going on. And I finally told her the truth that I was homeless. And so she actually allowed me to stay with them. I slept on the couch, and we stayed there. And I'm not telling anybody this is right, I don't believe it's right. But I did move in with my wife before we were married. And we lived together for a year and a half. And I tell this, you know, I believe everybody needs to be transparent in church. That's how people get delivered.
Right.
But I tell people all the time, I was sitting there one day in what I call my weed room. I was smoking weed, and I was listening to some music, and the music changed, and it said, let me touch you and see if you are real. And it was God. It was the song and it made me actually have a conversation with Jesus Christ right there. And I put that weed down and gave my life to God right there. And my mother and father had seen me in 3 years. They thought I was dead. They didn't know where I was. And I called them that night. And I'm sorry if I'm going too long.
No, you're good.
But I called them that night, and unbeknownst to me, my dad was the former pastor here. And he had got up in the pulpit the week before about to preach a sermon, and he stopped. My mom was telling me this. She said he just stopped. He couldn't talk, and he stood there for a long time. Then he said, the Lord just told me that my son is coming home. And then a week later, I called, and I started to try to, you know, say I was sorry for this and that, and you know, but he said, son, I don't need to hear any of that. Just come home. And I packed my bags that night, and I left. My wife thought I had smoked some kind of crazy weed that messed up my mind. And she didn't understand what was going on. She didn't speak to me for 6 months. But she did start coming to church and sitting in the back of the church here and just listening to my father preach. And she gave her life to the Lord. And we got married. And the rest is history. The Lord has tremendously blessed me to do things that I thought would never happen in my life. In fact, I thought I'd be dead by now. I didn't think I'd make it past 21. But that's what I try to tell people all the time. Doesn't matter where you are. It matters that you want to come out of it. And if you want to come out of it, there's a God that can deliver you and save you.
Right. So when you was 15, or before your grandmother passed, were you ready to go ahead and do the trial sermon? But I know you probably was nervous.
Yeah.
But after she passed away, it was kind of like you just didn't want to do it, or just because she wasn't there, or you was just like, this is your excuse to get out of it?
It was a little both. I absolutely was ready for it. It happened over the summer. about that, by the time I was getting ready to go back to school,
Mm-hmm.
the pressure of my peers,
Right.
like I can't do this
Mm-hmm.
because I won't be made. They gonna crucify me
Right.
at school, and so the thing is that one of my great best friends now. He lives in Huntsville. He started preaching when he was 16. So I saw that example before me, that the pressure that he went through,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to go through
Do
that.
it, right.
And so with that, and two, with how my grandmother passed, I was angry.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like the hospital did enough to try to save her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was angry. I was angry at God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to live like a wild man,
Mm-hmm.
for the next 7 years of my life.
But if you was to have thought about it like you think about it now,
Mm-hmm.
you and your friend actually could have went through it together.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and then it would have
Absolutely.
been probably an easier journey.
Mhm.
But I do know, because I have a young friend, and he's a minister,
Mhm.
and he's trying, and he had to actually go through some of his stuff, and it was a lot of peer pressure. And him just like, well, he got called so young that now it's kind of like, you know, he didn't get to try this, he didn't get to try this, he didn't.
Yeah.
And then I know the temptation is like out there, so he kind of, you know, ran a little bit, you know, but now he's trying to come back. So we just like really praying for him to come back, because a
Yeah.
lot of people now they know his history,
Mhm.
and it's a whole different story. So
Yeah.
you know, that's the only thing about that. But back to like your wife,
Uh-huh.
mother,
Mhm.
you know, it's like God seemed to have put her in that place at that moment to that she received you. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, even though, you know, she actually gave you a chance to do something and not actually have to sleep like this. So
Right, right.
that was really good.
Mhm.
You really do have a very interesting testimony. It's really interesting. And a lot of people really need to know, because a lot of people going in and out of jail and stuff, and they actually get you so wrapped up
Right.
that, you know, it's like you keep getting tied up, even
Tied
if you're
up,
not
right.
doing anything.
Exactly.
They keep tying you back up
Right.
to the system. So, but if it's anything else would you like to share, anything or anything about your church or anything?
Well, I started, I started in the ministry 17 years ago, but part of my story is that my great grandfather was a pastor. My great grandfather was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. My dad was a pastor. And I always thought my brother was going to be the one.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted this. Never desired it. That's why I fought it so, because, growing up, I never talked. When my parents, everybody thought my parents had 3 children. They never knew me because I never talked. And so I was like, God, why me?
Right.
My brother talks all the time.
Right.
He never shuts up.
Right.
He's always talking. So why do you get him? But that's the greatness of God, that
Mm-hmm.
I look at it now and I say it's like 6.5 billion people on this earth, and he looked at a 14-year-old boy in West End
Mm-hmm.
to carry his word.
Right.
It's an awesome task, and I never thought that I would actually pastor this church. My father pastored this church for 22 years, and I actually assisted him for the first 10 years of my ministry. I sat up under him and learned. And in our denomination, the bishop, he chooses the pastors, and so he'll see. So he sent me to a church in Brighton. I was in Brighton for 5 years. And when I went there, the first Sunday I went there, they handed me the key, and I went in, and I was like, well, the members. And he said, you're the member. And so he put me there to restart the church. The church had just sat dormant for 5 years. And when we left there, we had about 50 members, and we served that community. But the Lord had a way of just doing this, and my dad, he turned 70 years old, and he said the Lord told him it's time to stop. And he wanted me to come back. And so I came back, and we had a marriage here at the altar, and both churches combined. And we got married here at the altar. And so it's been a wonderful experience. We just started putting an addition onto the back of the church we're working on now to give us more room. But God is tremendously blessing, and I just believe you stay humble. God will do the exalting. So I just stay humble.
Right. That's interesting you actually was put in that church. And I know that it was times you probably wanted to like actually give up, because it's like, okay, how I'm gonna get people in here and they're not thinking I'm crazy, and you walking up, and I know you said you actually is a quiet person.
Yeah.
So like with me, like I actually didn't think I was gonna be the one to go out and actually do interviews. Like I never thought that God wanted me to do that either, because I'm like, I'm the type, if you want to take charge, you can do it. I don't want to. I don't want to have no part. That's too much responsibility.
Absolutely.
But then when I end up doing this, I end up having to make the decisions and different things. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish somebody else can go up there for me and do it.
Yeah.
But so I know if I was a challenge trying to get people to actually come in.
It was a big challenge, especially when you're preaching and birds are flying over your head, because the roof fell in twice while I was there.
Wow.
The roof, I mean, the church is real old. It's sky high. I mean, it's way up there, old building, and the roof was falling in. It fell in twice, and literally, sometimes we preaching, birds will be flying overhead, and you know, it's real embarrassing. You don't have any money to repair anything, and you're trying to do ministry, but the Lord always provided for us. He would send people. I mean, people sent money from around the world to that church. When we were there, we actually painted houses in Brighton for free. We would paint, go in the community, and we would let them pick out their colors that they wanted, and we would paint the houses. But we didn't have enough people to actually do the work. But the Lord sent a group. My brother, actually, he went out on the website, put that we needed some help, and when it happened, 2 bus loads came in there with people from all over the country, and they just came in there for 2 weeks, and they helped us paint all of those houses. Didn't charge us a penny, didn't want any food. They actually fed us. and so God have a way. When you really want to do something for Him, He will make a way for it to happen. Yeah.